All right. Hey, all.
Hi, everybody.
Everybody say hi. This is
Hello,
on
everyone.
Right. There's our camera. Okay, so I'm so glad that you all are here to join us for Are You Down with OTP Changes? I'm pretty sure if you're here, you know us, but I guess we should introduce ourselves. We'll let Chris Mann go first.
I'm Chris Mann.
That was good, Chris.
That was so
and efficient.
And
Thank
yes,
you.
Do you want to tell us something?
Real estate attorney with Mann, McGivney, and Jordan. If you are watching this, there's a really good chance that you've closed with us already.
Good job. You can go next.
And I'm Chris Barnett. If you're watching this, there's a decent chance that you've actually been in one of my classes, CE or pre or post license, and a regular colleague of Candace's.
And I'm Candace. And if you're watching this, you definitely know me because, ta-da, why wouldn't you want to?
Yeah.
So we are going to be talking about the OTP. And in case you're a new agent, that is the offer to purchase and contract. You know that once a year, at least once a year, the contract changes. There was that year it changed twice in a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's important to remind everybody about the once a year thing, because a lot of new agents, they think that every time it changes, it's something major. It's not always something major. Oftentimes it's just technical. And we'll go over some of those technical changes as well as some of the larger changes as well.
So this happened July 1st, 2019, and you have until
the end of August, grace period of 60 days.
Yeah.
And I will still get the old contract for another 3 years because there are agents who refuse.
I don't understand.
And by the way, Chris, as long as you're talking about that, the fact that the contract changes, now obviously I would consider an agent to be negligent if they're not using the new documents. However, does it affect the validity of the contract in any way?
It does not.
Yeah.
If your folks are using, if you give your folks an old contract, and that's the one that they use, that's the one that's valid. Like the big change in 2015 was the shifting of the HOA transfer fee. We were getting the old one for over a year, and if you were representing a buyer, you were costing them money. And so that sort of thing can happen.
Great point.
You all sound so smart. I like it. All right, so let's go over these changes. You all, well, hopefully you know that every year, I don't think you all can see this, there's a summary of changes. And this can be found on the Realtor site. So they go through and they say, hey, these are all the contracts we changed, and this is what we did. So the first change for the OTP, y'all looking at me like I have a plan.
How would you like to start? Would you like to start just going down over the contract, or are we going to go from the changes page?
Let's go through the contract.
Okay, sweet.
Right? So any changes on page 1?
You know, nothing changed on page 1. There are no markups that you'll see when you look at it from the Realtor page. The first change is on page 2 at the top, having to do with earnest money.
Okay. Anything major here? I mean,
I think the reason behind this change is fascinating.
Okay.
I don't think anybody necessarily, unless you're a lawyer, really cares that much. But there is a lawsuit where somebody is claiming that because there was no earnest money on a contract, the liquidated damages clause in the contract didn't apply. Because the liquidated damages clause was that liquidated damages was earnest money, and if there's no earnest money, that doesn't apply, and you can sue somebody for whatever you want. And so that's the reason they've made this change. I think the Real Estate Commission has made the similar error, or the Forms Committee has made the similar error, and that now it's earnest money and due diligence. And if you have no earnest money and no due diligence, you're literally exactly in the same spot. But that's the reason why, and that's fascinating. That the
overall is that if you're the buyer, you can sue for whatever.
Exactly.
If you're the seller, you can't sue. You're accepting your earnest money and your due diligence money as your sole remedy.
That's right.
All right.
Even if that is zero. And this is actually, while it is significant, it's an example of, for most people, it's just a technical change based on that lawsuit that Chris was describing.
Okay. I like that. Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions out there?
Yeah, as you have questions, just type them in the comment box and we will yell at you.
Oh, we got some likes. Yay. Those are for me. Yay.
Clearly.
Yes. All right. Okay. So anything else on here? No. Oh, and we're going to give everybody a chance once we go through the contract to ask us any random questions, but we wanted to go over the changes first. So let's move on to page 3. No major changes here.
No major changes. I will say that I really do like that the Forms Committee has added way more warnings and notes than they used to have. So it helps a buyer looking at this or a seller to understand that this is what they're trying to do here, because that's a nice added change for the contract.
I love having or suggesting that people go over this in all the colored sections of the notes with a buyer or seller before
Great
they
advice.
try to
Yeah.
put in an offer. If they're a buyer or if they're a seller, before they receive an offer, make sure they actually understand what they're doing and not just, oh, sign here. So
Yeah, the point y'all making is interesting because sometimes in the haste and pace of a transaction, things that we normally would say, that's what the boxes say. But if you forgot it, then the contract actually prompts you to say it. One other point, there were a couple of minor changes which you'll occasionally see throughout here that are made in yellow. Having said that, that just has to do with paragraph changes when they reformatted. It was just a minor change.
all right, so let's move on to page 4. Oh, page 4 for us.
Yeah.
And if you're using the other contract, it's still page 4. We're good. Anything on this page?
No, I think the first major sort of paragraph add is page 6.
Page 6. Well, then let's jump over to page 6.
Yeah, there were some typesetting issues that came up. So this contract is going to be at least 1, maybe 2 pages longer, depending on how you, which form you use. But it's really just a typesetting thing.
All right, so we're all on page 6, and I don't know. I'm gonna let you go.
Okay, now this is going to get into a long-winded conversation because this is going to be the bulk of what the changes are this year that we technically need to speak about. This will affect you on a day-to-day basis. So when we get to page 6, you see a paragraph that talks about the fact we're actually in the, I believe we're in the buyer due diligence phase of the contract. I want to speak to that just real quickly, and then I'll get to the important part.
Buyer
Technically
representation.
speaking, that buyer
Representation section.
Okay. And what this has to do with a section in here where the buyers were basically telling what they need to be doing during due diligence. Technically, this provision could be left out of the contract and it wouldn't change the contract. There's nothing there that's being negotiated. Having said that, because of the major change that came up this year with the contingent sell addendum, we're now telling the buyer that you need to make sure that you are examining during the due diligence period whether you're going to complete your contract. So we get to the sale of existing property paragraph. That is where we are, right? You looked at me strange for just a moment there.
You use all the big words.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can break them down for you.
I was like, wait, so basically what you're saying is if I'm a buyer's agent, I no longer have the contingent sale addendum, and I have to, as the agent, make sure my buyer is comfortable getting their loan during the due diligence period.
Yeah, you have no idea how important it is what you just said. It's because there is not an addendum to rely on if things go badly. It's completely needs to be decided during the due diligence phase, whether in fact.
So break it down for me, stupid, because you know me.
Okay.
So I'm a buyer, you're my agent. I have to sell my house. Before, we would have had the contingent sale addendum, and that contingent sale addendum said if I get under contract and I can't sell my other house, you're not my other house, then even after due diligence, I could still get my earnest money back.
It's one of the few cases you can get earnest money back after due diligence, and it was based on if your house in Texas fell through after the due diligence period. That is technically the only protection that the old contingent sale addendum had in it.
Got it.
That is no longer in existence.
Now, I would put an offer, and it would just be the offer. And if I have this house to sell in Texas, then what?
Then my conversation with the buyer on that is going to be around, there are 3 things that we need to think about in our negotiations. 1, how confident do you feel that you're going to be able to sell that house in Texas?
I'm hella valuable.
Clearly. If you're not comfortable with your ability to sell that, then what we're saying is after due diligence, your earnest money is going to be at risk. I'm not telling you not to make an offer on this house in Cary. What I'm saying is that if you do and you pass the due diligence date, then your earnest money is at risk.
Okay. So I have an attorney question.
Okay.
Why can't you just draft me a contingent sale addendum?
I totally can do that.
All right. Yeah. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
I think it's a neutral thing. In our market right now, contingent sale addendums are, if you're a listing agent, you're unless you absolutely have to, you're not accepting it. So in less than a fraction of 1% of all deals do we ever see them, because if you have 5, 6, 7, 12 offers, you're not worrying about that. You're going to tell a buyer no. So in our market, it's not a big thing. It's not going to change a whole lot for most transactions. But if it's something you want, ask us to do it. We're probably just going to go ahead and do a template so that we can do that.
I can't just use the old one?
I don't think that you should. I mean, I think there's a reason it was removed, and that you should probably just not use that. I mean, I guess in theory you could, but I'm not sure how your licensing board would
I'm
feel about
hearing
it.
you say, call an attorney.
Yeah, like I don't think if they're removing it for a reason, I think you should just skip that form, unless, because it's not like we're going to charge you for the form. You know, we're not going to charge people we work with for that form, so just use the one. And there's been a lot of confusion with that form for however long you guys have been using that form, the way that it's formatted right now. So we can draft one and use one that's much clearer about what you get back and what you can't, and when you can get it back and when you can't.
So if I, as a buyer or a buyer's agent, am working with at least Ma'am McGivney Jordan, you all will provide, if asked, a contingent sale addendum.
Right.
Chris, what are your thoughts on it? Like, I just want, just curious.
Well, just to tell a little bit of the history, the contingent sale addendum, at the time that the due diligence contract was created, the writers of the contract did not even want to have that form. They didn't feel it was necessary with a due diligence contract. So their concern was that agents would take it upon themselves to draft the form. And clearly we know that that's where things start going off base. In theory, a buyer or a seller could draft one, but we know that's going to go off base if that is the case. So what they came down with is, forget about all that. Let's figure it out in due diligence, just like we do the loan, just like we do the appraisal. Now we have added the contingent sale, and technically I shouldn't use the word contingent sale any longer, because I don't want people to believe that there's a contingency tied to your sale. If I could add one more thing, it is that old form that you're talking about, Chris, the one previous to this, which technically could be used till the end of August, nobody used it correctly.
Right.
I would get calls from agents who would say something to this effect: the due diligence has passed. My house in Texas is not under contract yet. What do we do now? And the answer to that question is, your contract is null and void.
Right.
Because that's what the old contingent sale addendum said.
Right.
And we would get arguments about earnest money. Technically, earnest money never should have been in play, because the contract was null and void if you didn't get your house in Texas under contract. Is very misunderstood.
Right. Which is why you should just use the one that we draft that will be clear.
Clearly.
So if I'm a buyer's agent, what do I do to protect my client? So I no longer have this contingent sale addendum, and
you have a come to Jesus meeting with them.
Okay.
And that basically goes something like this: if you want that house in Cary that 18 people are bidding on, then you're going to have to take a risk that you can sell your house in Texas or lose your money. Or you can sell your house in Texas and then go shopping, but that house is not going to be there any longer. Or you could go to an attorney and have it drafted. Chris is right on, though. In a hot market, I don't know how seriously a seller is going to take it, given the fact that they have 18 other offers.
No, I'm thinking that means agents need to have this conversation and speak to the lender.
Great point.
Because there are options there, depending on what they're doing and what's
Go
it
a little
look
bit
like.
deeper with that option.
What do you mean?
Well, like the bridge loan idea.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, you want me to, or just say
No, just mention it. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's a bridge loan. There, I mentioned it.
Okay. Okay.
Well, bridge loan is a loan that you're going to get to basically bridge the fact that you've got these two houses that you now own. And this is an option that works for some people. It doesn't work for some people. It may cost money. It may be out of their budget, but you'll never know unless you talk to your lender. And I mean, even if they talk to the attorney first, they can say, okay, let's look at what your options are.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure nobody has any questions so far. Kind of silent on the questions thing. Right. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's right. And I think that it will sort of push agents to have a more serious conversation. And I think that's important about, list your house for sale before you go shopping for a new house. I think is the big thing. So, like, if you are like under contract and you're going to sell it, mostly, then maybe folks are in a better position to go out and put that next offer in on their house. I
mean, I guess just off the top of my head, I'm thinking you can do, due diligence, initial earnest money. There's no reason why you can't do additional earnest money.
We actually have drafted multiple phase earnest money agreements.
Ooh.
So that after 2 weeks, they have $500 that goes in. After the next week, they have actually, so we've done that for a couple of people so that they can phase it out based on whatever is going on in that deal. And in a hot market with 18 offers, most listing agents don't want that. But for particular purchases, particular properties, it can work out.
So Anything else on that section?
Only that in teaching this in the to previous classes, people will say, well, this is fair or this is not fair. The market is not fair. The market is what the market is. All we can do is work. We're not magicians. We can't fix every problem. We just talk about what the alternatives are for the clients. So that's the conversation.
Gotcha. All right, what's our next changes? Anything else? Oh, big one. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. We got a big one.
Well, you said that
I
you
was
were going
gonna-
to say
the
it. You
big
do
one.
it.
Oh, so the buyer representations in paragraph 5, where if you believe your buyer is going to get down payment assistance, North Carolina Housing Finance, DHIC, you can check that box. There's not a whole lot with North Carolina Housing Finance or DHIC that requires seller involvement. They don't really have to sign stuff, but there are programs that may, and so they've got that as an option so that you're letting a seller know something more might come on down the road that you might have to sign to make sure this deal goes through. It's similar to the FHA block because people need to know that there are additional things that go along with that, and some down payment assistance programs have that. So you're just giving a seller notice of what's coming.
How often do you see this becoming, like just in the past, how often have you seen the down payment assistance and then the questions?
Down payment assistance in our region is actually really common because North Carolina Housing Finance deserves a lot of credit for what they do. Tons of people use that program. I think they do a lot of really great work in our region. So it's a lot. And it's the underwriting one, it's a little bit weird. We do see an occasional delay, but it's not really like it's almost completely invisible to a seller unless there's a delay based on underwriting for that. But they almost always close. I can maybe think of one time in 6 years where something came up, and that was really surprising. So it's not for sellers; it's invisible.
Okay.
This is a thing. It's nice to have, but most of the time this is invisible to sellers.
So it's just another representation to the seller from the buyer. Like, you need to know I'm getting down payment assistance. It might involve you.
Right.
FYI.
And if it's North Carolina Housing Finance, it probably won't.
Yeah.
So many of these things, I think, just start the conversation because whether it applies to down payment assistance or VA or FHA, these are things that people literally, and agents need to give guidance on this. Again, going back to the market is not fair. Not all buyers can buy all houses. And if I'm a seller and I'm looking at this and you're in a program that you have very little money down, and I know the house is not going to appraise, that you have no flexibility. So it's all about the conversation.
Well, I think it's a conversation agents need to have with each other about, do you know how these down payment assistance programs work?
Right.
Before you suggest something to your buyer and you try to get under contract, do you know how it's going to affect a transaction in general?
Ken, can I ask you a question real quickly? Someone asked whether this video will be available. It is being recorded, right?
It is being
Okay.
recorded by Facebook Live, and then
Okay.
I'll upload it and the magic will happen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Anything else on page 6?
Just paragraph changes. Done.
All right. Moving on to page 7. And at the top, it's just an extension of what we were just talking about with the contingent sale. Well, no longer contingent sale. You're just letting the seller know, hey, do I have a property to sell or lease that in order to buy?
Yeah, literally, this is the language that was in the contingent sale addendum about that. Is your house on the market? Is it under contract? Who do you have it listed with? Just so that the seller can look at it to determine whether this is someone they want to be tied to.
This section is purely informational for the seller.
Great point.
It is not making anything contingent on anything. You are just letting them know this is a thing. That is it. If somebody ever thinks that this makes the sale contingent on selling another house, they have misunderstood what this is.
That would never happen.
Never.
Never, 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 never.
It will likely happen this year, and there will be something changed in this contract next year to reflect that. But what Chris said is exactly right. They go out of their way to make sure that people understand this is not creating a contingency.
And so just make sure I'm not crazy, but I could be. The whole section where it said, hey, you could give a copy of the seller to the seller of the other offer with all the important information filled out. That's now in the additional provisions addendum.
No, it's still in there. It says that they will be able to provide that information, and they can redact anything that's confidential information.
Perfect. Just making sure. Okay. I'm good on that then. Yay.
I don't see any changes on the next page.
Nothing on page 8.
Okay.
Page 9. We were just talking about this earlier.
This is a good one.
Okay. Why is it a good one, Mr. Chris?
Because sellers want to turn off their utilities.
Why?
I don't know. Like, I get it. But so it happens, I would say, at least once a month in our office, where buyers go to do the walkthrough and all the utilities are off and buyers can't actually make sure everything's in working condition. And I would say 3/4 of the time, buyers and buyers agents just throw up their hands and say, screw it, we're going to sign anyway. It happens. But then you're going to have that 1/3 to 1/4 of list or buyers agents who are like, absolutely not. We're not buying this until we can go back in and check everything. And this is making explicit that it is the seller's obligation to pay to have all the utilities turned back on, which is great, because that's always the fight in that scenario. Is whose obligation at that point is it? And this is saying it is seller's obligation.
Even before that, just the getting your inspections done to begin with, it specifically says, including dewinterizing. You're buying a house that's been winterized, or they've just not been there. Maybe they had a lease and then they turned off the utilities. Now the seller needs to have those utilities put back on in the seller's name so that I, the buyer, can do my inspections. That's not my job to call and get them turned in my name. And I remember we used to have to do that, and it was a pain. So I really, really love this section. It makes it really clear to the seller, hey, this is your job. You call the electric company, you call water, whoever, turn these on so I can check them and keep them on until
and I feel
closing.
Bad for listing agents, because I'm sure they always have this conversation with their seller. I'm sure that they always do that. And sellers are just going to do what sellers do and turn it off 3 days before the closing or whatever. But listing agents should be having this conversation with their seller. They shouldn't even plan to turn off utilities until they've closed, honestly, because closing gets delayed, lender has a delay, something happens, and then you're in this position of trying to figure out what to do. It shouldn't even happen. It shouldn't occur. Don't turn off utilities until you've closed. Don't make the phone call.
One thing I mentioned to Candace before we started is I was teaching a couple of days ago, and somebody brought up the fact that this was going to make all sellers required to have existing utilities. Well, keep in mind, if you're dealing with a foreclosure, there may be ancillary paperwork that would override this. So don't assume that this is going to make us make banks turn on utilities and all of that. There could be other addenda.
Right. It's actually a really good point in that, because people will come to me.
Actually, a good
point. One time ever. No, because people will often come to me with those bank contracts or reload contracts, and they'll say, but this isn't what's in our contract. Like we don't have to do this. The only thing that matters in your transaction is the contract you sign. This might be our North Carolina standard OTP, but if you have an addendum that changed the terms of this, that applies. If you have a completely separate contract, that's the contract that applies. Just because it's the way we do things on this form, in that scenario particularly, the one that you sign is the one that matters, and it may not be ours.
So if I'm a buyer's agent or just any agent with a contract that I've never seen or an addendum that I've never seen, would your suggestion be then, hey, Chris, I've got this, could you look it over or advise my clients and me so I know what's in it?
Yeah.
Don't just have your client sign something and you don't know what they're signing.
Right. Don't just assume it's the same.
It's going to bite you in the butt at some point, especially new construction.
Yes. I don't love it when agents send me the 85-page new construction contract
after they're under contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Typically. One interesting question that came out. There's several comments. Thank you for the comments. But the down payment assistance. This is kind of a tricky question here. Is it now a material fact that your buyer is receiving down payment assistance?
Well, you can't necessarily. Let's let the attorney.
Well, I don't think it's a material fact.
It's a representation section,
right.
So you are representing, so you can't lie. I mean,
You can't lie, but you can choose not to answer.
But okay, so when you're talking about I'm just jumping to, do you have to sell another property? That it's yes or no. It's a very cut and dry. I either do or I don't.
Right.
But
I think in that scenario, if you do decide, if you mark no or you don't mark anything there, and then you do get down payment assistance, to the extent that it's invisible to a seller, I don't think it's material. Right. To the extent it requires a seller to interact and intervene or do something to help it along, I don't think they have to.
Okay, so then the buyer would be in breach, right? Because
the buyer would have to figure out how to do the transaction either without the seller's signature or without down payment assistance at all.
So I think this was what we were talking about the other day. Was it you, Chris? I don't know, but there was basically a closing where, or there was going to be a closing where they switched loan products, and now it was VA. So now the seller has to pay stuff, but that doesn't make the contract void. It just says
Seller doesn't have to do this.
seller doesn't have to do it, and if the buyer can't get financing, the buyer's in breach. So I see what you're saying. Basically, you're saying if the buyer needs down payment assistance and it doesn't affect the seller at all, who cares? But realize, buyer, if you get down payment assistance and you need something from the seller doesn't have to do anything. Whereas before it was saying that they would be agreeing to do those things. Are they agreeing or are they just knowing?
Well, I think knowing, but I think it's similar to the FHA provision where, although that's a separate addendum.
So it says, do some mortgage loan programs and down payment assistance programs selected by buyer may impose additional repair obligations, conditions, or costs upon the seller or buyer, and more information may be needed. So if it is something where you need something from the seller, you still need to ask for it.
Right. Sure. That's right.
Okay. And then that's when I say call you.
Cool.
Great. Any other questions? I think we're good. All right, let's keep on rolling. Next page, page 10, if you're following along, it talks about prorations and adjustments with seller responsible for the prorated amounts. I mean, didn't it already say that?
Sort of. Because of the way that it was worded before, there was an argument as to who actually would pay the HOA prorations, property tax prorations on the actual day of closing.
Clearly, they didn't do pre-licensing. Well,
so as a matter of course, all real estate attorneys make, as far as I'm aware, make the seller pay prorated HOAs, prorated property taxes on the day of closing, through the day of closing, except reload companies and bank-owned REO properties. Those folks, because they have this sort of perceived sense of power in that scenario, will always push it off on the other party.
Got you. For the day of.
For the day of.
Okay.
Like, that $12 15,000 times makes a difference, I guess, and makes, I see it. But that's where this comes in, is because you would have all us attorneys doing it one way, and then every time we do an REO or a relo, we'd have, those folks pushing back and saying, no, we're not paying the day of closing. And now, to the extent they actually use this contract, they are.
Gotcha.
Unless overridden by an addendum.
Exactly.
Good.
Which, can I go off base here for just a second? Do we have time for that?
I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're only half an hour in. Go for it.
Having nothing to do with prorations, I've started seeing a lot of places where excise tax, where we do it a standard way in North Carolina. But if you're working with a builder, oftentimes they're shifting that burden by contract to the buyer.
That's correct. And it's sort of it's part of their incentive structure to use their preferred attorney, is how that works. So in a lot of builder contracts, excise tax, which is basically the tax that you pay to sell the house, it goes to the county, it goes to the state. Standard is that is a seller expense, but builders will make it a buyer expense in their contract and say, but if you use our lender and you use our attorney, we'll pay it. And that's just part of their incentive structure to kind of push people into their process, into their people. So
another reason why people should be reading that contract. If it's not the standard, you need to be having somebody, an attorney, read it before your buyer.
And that actually matters a lot for lenders, because that excise tax is something that gets disclosed on their initial loan estimate. And if they get that wrong, so if they just assume that excise tax is being paid by the seller, and then it's a new construction contract or something that shifts it to the buyer, that loan officer has to pay that. And they get real grumpy about that. And I understand why. But because it's part of the loan estimate and it cannot change, loan officers end up paying that more often than not when it shifts.
Ooh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah, I bring that up exactly for what you said. Is if you're not using this contract, things can be different. So it's just a little good point.
Yeah. Let's see. What's next? Flipping the page. We've got the risk of loss section. We're on page 11, section 11, 1111, which coincidentally is my brother's birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
Now we know.
Fine. I'm going to let y'all handle it then, talking about me.
I'll start it off, but then I may end up throwing it to Chris, and I apologize, we didn't prepare you in advance for this, but there is a minor technical point that we're trying to get to.
Yes.
What happened in the risk of loss is paragraphs 11 and 12, risk of loss and condition of property at closing were merged into one paragraph. The argument was people were they were confused about which one applied. Was it risk of loss or was it condition at closing if the buyer wanted to have a remedy? So they've merged them. They haven't changed radically, but there has been one small change. So here's what it has always said. The seller bears the risk of loss up until the time of capital C closing, okay? If in fact there is substantial damage to the property, the buyer has the ability to walk away. Historically, what this paragraph has said is that the buyer has the ability to walk away and get both their earnest money and their due diligence fee back. And now they have actually dropped due diligence from this paragraph. Chris, well, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you think that represents a substantial change or no?
I'm going to guess no, except I would have to actually think about it more than I'm going to do in the next 10 seconds. Generally speaking, I would say if the seller cannot convey to you the house in the same condition and basically have to terminate the contract, that would be a seller breach, and then yes, a buyer would be entitled to damages, except it's actually a part of the contract and it's understood, it's here.
Right.
So then it's technically a breach, but within the confines of this paragraph, which would basically say that you're agreeing, in theory, that that's your damages. Don't hold me to that internet, because I actually haven't really thought about that. But
yeah,
I understand. I see the question both ways. I see it both ways without actually having really.
So what I hear us saying is, I am a buyer. I'm going to buy a house. It was in good condition when I looked at it, and now there's something materially wrong.
Just say it burns down.
Okay, it burns down.
Yeah.
Do I get my due diligence money back?
Right, and like the obviously the gut answer is absolutely yes.
But does that what the contract says?
Right, and that's the part. Like, had they left that part in this paragraph the way that it was, yes. And had seller breached in any other way, a title defect, anything else in any other part of the contract, absolutely. My only sort of thought process on maybe not is that the contract is anticipating that. The contract has said that here. So it's a breach inside of this paragraph. So your remedies are what's inside of this paragraph. May not be entirely true. Again, I'd have to actually sit down.
So we don't know the answer.
I don't have the answer.
You will let us know on one of your future Thursday.
Yeah,
Chris, I've talked to a couple of attorneys about this as well, and they have similar answers on that. I do have a phone call in to the writers of this contract, and I will let you know so that you can post
what
that
their expectation was.
as well. Why, and was it significant that they left it out, or did somebody just save a couple of words?
Right.
So.
Okay. Anything else on this page? I think not.
No,
Oh, wait, we had some questions that I wanted to address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So Christy had asked, if a buyer's loan program changes, do we have to document it as a revision of the OTP?
If you are changing into a government-backed program like FHA or VA, yes, I would.
You would, but do you have to?
Well, I mean, have to is probably strong. But to the extent you're going to try to get a seller to sign an FHA addendum,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you want to, because the problem with, particularly if you're shifting to FHA, is you need to let that seller know. I think the FHA one is the big one, because that is basically sort of tying that property to an appraisal. There's all sorts of different inspection things that are different in that a seller might tell you they don't want that, and I think they have the right to say that. Now,
I'm just going to play devil's advocate. You're the seller, I'm the buyer. Assuming it didn't affect my ability, I'm not asking you to pay anything, and it doesn't affect my ability to get, closed. Right. Do I have to tell you?
Right, and I don't think so. If you're going from FHA to conventional, I think that matters.
But what if I'm going conventional to FHA and I'm not asking you to do anything? Am I in breach?
I think you are putting yourself in a position that if things go south, I don't know that the answer is yes. I don't know if the answer is yes. But I think you're putting yourself in a position to create conflict later if something comes up. None of this matters unless there's an intervening event that causes conflict. That's always the thing. It's 99 times out of 100 or 999 times out of 1,000, none of it matters.
Until.
But that one time that it matters a lot. And it's
But you can't just not sell me the house.
No, like, yeah, they'll have to sell the house
Okay.
to the extent that it can be sold without an intervening act.
Okay. Yeah. It did just come up recently where a seller can't not sell because they've changed because it's the buyer's representation on what they intend to do.
Right.
But I also can't force you, seller,
to
do something and then I'm in breach because I didn't get financing.
Right.
But again, I mean, I definitely think somebody should use it.
You never want to be having the argument about who breached first.
The interesting case I've seen this come up in they've gone one of two ways. One way is in a multiple offer situation, someone wants to disclose that their buyer is going to pay cash for the property because they feel like it's going to give them an advantage. And then once they go into contract, they switch to conventional, which takes no action on the seller's part, in which case I would say no issue there. The bigger issue is we had a case where someone came in conventional large down payment and changed to VA, which did require that the seller to sign it. And I consider those to be two different situations.
And if you are a listing agent, or no, sorry, if you're a buyer's agent and I know you would never do this, but if you are submitting an offer that says cash and you know that's not true, you are doing a disservice to your clients. Don't do that.
Having said that, be a misrepresentation.
Well, as a listing agent, though, you would vet it to find out if they had liquid assets to be able to do it. So I agree.
Nobody we know would ever do that.
Right. Yeah, we know a lot of people.
All right, moving on, because obviously Chris just has some feelings there.
You do know a lot of people. I think that's really it.
I think that is it in this one. Entire agreement. Wire fraud warning. Yeah, I think that's it.
We had a signature line on the back page.
Oh, yeah, we did have the signature
to make sure
line.
that it was not confusing. I'm not sure how it helped, but if that works, and then from now on, you're going to have to get used to saying you want to receipts on page 14 instead of 13.
Yes. I don't think there were any other major changes. And of course, now I'm looking at the summary of changes. So we've talked about eliminating the contingent sale addendum. We've gone over the offer to purchase and contract. So if y'all have any questions, just chime in and hopefully we'll see them. You've got the vacant lot and land. Is there anything?
Yeah, again, for the new agents, just to, when they look at this and it looks like there's how many, 6, 7 pages of changes, but oftentimes the recommended changes just parallel the changes that were made to the offer to purchase. So when you look at it, it's really not as intimidating as it seems to start with.
Yeah. I don't remember or think anything else that was big here.
On the OTP.
Just on any of them.
Well, can we hit on a couple of things on some of the ancillary forms?
Yes, we can.
It really, again, it's minor, so you're exactly right. But buyer possession before closing and seller possession after closing agreements, there was a change there. And again, it's about the conversation, because there's a line in the contract that basically says, buyer, you move in early. Well, clearly, if the buyer moves in before closing, they can't have homeowners insurance on the property, so they need to have renter policies. I think all of us as agents would think about that. Having said that, the point that they're making is that buyers might think about the effect that it's going to have. For example, what if the buyer does damage to the seller's house? They have agreed to indemnify the seller against loss. So they're recommending to the buyer to have insurance, not just to cover your content, but also to cover you if you make a damage to the property and then you don't close on the property.
Says you should, if you're going to be letting the seller stay or having the buyer move in, you need to have an in-depth conversation with the insurance person.
Absolutely.
As a real estate attorney, I hate, with a capital H, buyer possession foreclose. I hate it. I hate it for agents. I hate it for parties. I think it's, generally speaking, a terrible idea. Seller possession after close, I don't hate it with a capital H. It's like a lowercase h, but I still don't like it. But in the scenario, I will tell you that the number of parties who are actually getting renter's insurance in that scenario is nearly zero.
Wow. Really?
I am shocked, absolutely shocked every time I see it. We can tell people they need to do it. They almost never do it. And it's really something that the agents who sort of go into that lightly, who think it's no big deal, like whatever.
It's empty, why not?
Like whatever. You need to really have a serious conversation with your clients about what this means. If you're a seller, if you're a listing agent, what you are giving your buyers access to and the things that can happen, and they really need to get insurance. because
So-
it's nearly zero that
Yeah.
actually do it.
I'm almost wondering if we need to have a something in writing that says we highly advise you to have this conversation with your agent, have them respond.
Yeah.
Because I think
to
oftentimes
this.
it's not even needed. Like I think oftentimes they think, well, our closing date was going to be on the 21st, but now the sellers are saying they're not really going to be ready for a couple of days, so we'll
Right.
just give them seller possession after close. Why are we not just pushing the closing back a couple of days?
Hmm.
Like there's no reason not to. I have
Incidentally,
strong feelings about it.
I hate buyer possession.
I do too.
Come from new home sales, we never let anyone move in early.
Why does anybody need to move in early?
Yeah.
I first of all, don't you want to have the house cleaned? You don't want to sit on somebody else's dirt, and it's just too messy. Too
Right.
messy.
Well, and you have the scenario where a buyer moves in 3 weeks before close, and then the air conditioning goes out.
And who's going to pay for
Who's
it?
going to pay for it?
Or they break something in there,
Or they have 3 weeks to figure out all the things about this house that annoy them.
and now they don't want the house anymore.
Or and it's a whole lot of drama that's not worth it for
Mhm.
anyone, except in the most extreme of circumstances.
So you would just tell the buyer to get a hotel.
Get an extended stay.
Yeah.
Extended stay.
You
So-
know I'm not nice, so
which brings up another interesting point, a little bit off topic again, but having said that is, what is your backup plan? If in fact there's a delay in closing, are agents doing a good job talking about what's going to happen if it doesn't? We know that loans could mess up. We know that there could be 1, 2, 3, 14-day delays theoretically. Yes, buyer's agents have to push their people to the closing, but having said that, listing agents need to prepare their clients for anything that could come up that could affect that,
Well-
because technically the buyer's not in breach if they're acting within good faith within that 14-day period. So,
So there should, you're absolutely right, a backup plan, both sides. I would say, don't let your buyer assume, hey, the day of closing, you're going to move in. Go ahead and start from the beginning. You need to add a little cushion here, whether it's cleaning, whether it's getting the keys changed, whether you have a pushback here. Don't make it so that your moving trucks show up the same day, because how many times have we run into that where, well, what am I supposed to do with my stuff? And it's on a moving truck, and
Number of
Now
folks
what?
that sit down at the table to close and literally have a truck like coming that they're trying to move their stuff in this like before we've even recorded. Happens all the time. So having a backup plan, and I get it. I understand that they're selling a house the same day that they're buying a house, and obviously like the idea of letting stuff sit on a truck for a day is not ideal.
right.
But have that conversation with your sellers and your buyers, because if you set the right expectation level, and that's where you end up, everybody loves you. If you set the wrong expectation level and we end up in the same spot,
you're the devil.
people are mad at you. And it's all about setting the expectation levels.
Okay. Any other, let's see, changes, information. There you go.
Which one? What are you giving me?
This is the summary of changes.
Oh, I got this. Here we go.
Yes. Why?
There is a something that really Chris will probably be the best one to speak
The estate
to
forms?
this. The
estate.
the change. Well, it's not a change, but it's
Could you give us a mini lesson on how to deal with estates?
So yes, I can.
Thank you.
When you go under if you're a listing agent going in to meet with the heirs of a deceased to sell their property, it is very important to get a copy of the will, if they have one, and you want to ask the question: has this will been filed with the county? Have you probated it? Real estate doesn't pass through probate, but it doesn't pass through probate only if you've probated the rest of the estate. So heirs inherit automatically at death. But that is only valid if a will has been filed in the clerk's office in a proper way and a notice to creditors has been run. And once you have a copy of that will and you know that stuff's been done, assuming the will is typical, the heirs own it outright. The seller on your contract is almost never the estate of grandma.
thank you.
So as long as the person who died did all the right things with their will, hired an attorney, did all the right things with their will, the minute that person dies, the new owner actually is the heir, and that's the seller.
Well, as long as the heirs, the executor of the estate, has done everything that they need to do with the will, and that the will was valid, because that's sometimes a thing. So assuming all that stuff is correct, the heirs are the seller. They are the owners in their individual capacity, not as the executor of or the heir of. It is Joe and Sarah now own it. So those are your sellers, and just like anything else in North Carolina, their spouses have to sign seller docs and that sort of stuff. But it's a good idea just to have that conversation with them, the expectation level that I know that you are handling all of grandma's affairs, but there are 6 siblings and all 6 have to sign everything. Unless they all want to sign powers of attorney and record them. Every heir has to be involved. Again, 95% of the time. There are some wills that specifically say, and I direct my executor to sell my real estate. Then that is the executor. But that is exceptionally rare. And it's the same if somebody dies without a will, it's the heirs. The heirs are the ones. And that is the sort of the big thing, because almost, I would say 60% of contracts in that scenario say the seller is the estate of, and that's almost never right.
So if I'm the agent, I'm getting ready to do a listing presentation, and I know that somebody's died, and blah, blah. Do I call you? I meet with them and then call you, and then meet with them?
Meet with them and then call. Basically, just have the conversation. If you can get a copy of the will and the letters testamentary from them, they may have them. Get copies of that, and then you just send it over to us, and we can tell you. People do it wrong all the time, and it's okay because it's an easy fix.
Okay.
But
definitely call you.
But definitely call us. I mean, because also if you call us before you go and say, I'm going to have, I don't expect everyone to remember this because it's sort of like just a nuanced part of the process. If you call me or Ron or Laura or Maggie and just have us run this through with you before you go into that, listing presentation, you sound smart. Well, you are ready. You're prepared.
They only sound smart.
Well, I mean, it's good to know. It's way better than going in and saying, I'm not sure. Because the more confident you sound about it,
the better they're going to feel about it.
They're more confident those clients are going to be signing up and selling their house with you.
So 9 times out of 10, we're probably overcomplicating it. It's probably just the heirs.
That's
However, CYA, call your attorney and make sure beforehand so that you don't have the icky later on.
Right. Because, I mean, you're going to just have to, do an addendum changing the parties to the contract.
Okay.
And that came up because of the change in the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, but it wasn't a major change. It was just, again, about the conversation. And just as an FYI, I think the commission is kind of seeing a theme here. Now, granted, they don't write this this form, but they contribute to it. But last year's update class included what to do if you're dealing with someone that has a power of attorney. Is it sufficient to be able to transfer the title? Now they're talking about estates who has the ability, and you can throw into that as well LLCs, corporations, or agents dealing with the party that has the ability to transfer title.
Gotcha. I think that's pretty much it. And we said we were going to open the floor to questions. I mean, if we all come up with any questions that somebody has, any comments that y'all want to add about any of this?
Was this giant wire fraud warning always on the last page of the contract?
Yes, the entire time you've been here.
For a couple of seasons, yeah.
All right.
Yes. It's been there for a while.
I just like it.
God bless.
I love it.
Let's see. I have a question. Where do we find the list of the new changes, like what we have? If I was more Facebook savvy, I'd say I attach it. But you just go to the
ncrealtors.org.
Yep, ncrealtors.org, and then where you can find all the contracts is where you'll find it.
Or you could
email one of us.
Any of us, and we can attach it and send to it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it online. I don't know. All right, anything else? Anything else that's popped up that y'all have run into?
There's a mention on here, and again, this is kind of a technical point, but the use of the forms, the unilateral right to terminate a contract versus the termination by mutual agreement.
That could be its own class.
Yes. Yeah, it literally could be. How about if we go this way? How about if we say, be careful about which one you use, because unilateral during the due diligence period, the buyer can just simply use Form 350 to terminate the contract if it's sent in before the end of the due diligence period, and it's done. You don't need a response from the seller. However, if you're using 390, it's by mutual agreement. So in theory, you would need to have the seller's agreement to terminate. So just be careful with those.
Somebody just asked me that today. Yep. All right, I think that's it. Any other last questions?
Tricia asked, do you recommend also using the wire transfer notification form?
Do they still have that?
I got to be honest with you, because of a wire fraud issue that we had earlier in the year, we had one created which literally says almost exactly what that says, but it it took us off the page to have another conversation, and we made it a requirement in our loop.
I definitely would.
Yeah.
I think
I would.
every time you can put that warning in front of your clients,
You should.
every single time. Like the one that's here, the separate form, our form when buyers and sellers go under contract, we send them one that has like all the warnings. And you every week, whatever, you should again call your client and mention it. Like every chance you get.
Well, we hear it. I'm not going to say a lot, but we're hearing about it. Whereas your buyers and your sellers aren't. So they think they're like, oh yeah.
They don't know. They don't
know what they don't know.
Right. And we can't make the assumption that what we know, because we do this every day, is something that they understand or know. People don't appreciate how risky this is. It's the one thing about this job that freaks me out.
That people don't know. We got to educate
the
public.
wire fraud is the one thing that I worry about.
But I think also it's a place that we can prove our value proposition is that, hey, let me tell you about these third-party cases. That's not going to happen if you use me and if you follow these directions and if you use our vendor partners.
If you follow
our directions. I was like, use me and do what I'm asking you to do, please. This has been fun. I'm surrounded by Chris's, and they're paying for my lunch. Yay!
Well, at least you're surrounded by Chris's.
That's right.
You know what? You still owe me chocolate covered strawberries, and you still owe me lunch. So, guys, I hope this helped. I think we should do it again with the termination of contracts. I just really feel like it would be helpful.
Okay. Let's just do it every week for no apparent reason.
Okay. Different people want to watch us. All right, all. Make sure that there's new comments. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Just
talking about the
just addendum.
Apparently, there is still one in zip form.
Okay. Apparently, there's still one in zip forms. So I hope you all liked it. We could do this. We could do. Oh, somebody's mad. We could do a Zoom. I don't know. We'll do it again. But thanks for tuning in, and I guess we'll see you later.
All right.
Everybody say bye.
All right. Thank you.